So, welcome everyone to this conversation about strategic alignment of learning and development. My name is André, and I'm the organizational development strategist at CrossKnowledge. And today I have with me the CEO of CrossKnowledge, Guillaume Gérard. Guillaume, thank you for joining me today. And would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners that may not know you so well?
Well, hi everyone. Thank you for having me. Truly delighted to be here with you. I have the privilege of leading amazing teams at CrossKnowledge. I first joined back in 2019 to help grow our sales and enhance our services. And since September 2024, time is flying, I've been serving as a CEO. Really, at CrossKnowledge, our mission is to hopefully lead the way in learning, helping organizations build capabilities and future-proof their workforces for the challenges ahead. We'll discuss that today, I believe.
Fantastic. I think it's fair to say, when you open up your social media today or listening to a range of podcasts or webinars that is available online, one thing we hear all the time today is how L&D needs to align with business strategy. And I think most of us have tried to do that. And, we map our programs to strategic priorities. We sit in planning meetings. We use business language. But for most of us, we still struggle to truly show the impact and value of what we deliver. Globally, I can also see that there is so much more investment in training than ever before, more learning tools, more libraries, and even now with the generative AI, even more content created than ever before. But yet, here we are, we're still having this conversation. We're still figuring out how do we prove relevance and value. So today, we're not going to tell you how to align better. We're actually going to challenge whether alignment is even still the right goal to have. I also like to, like I mentioned before, invite you to make use of the chat and submit questions. If we have time at the end, we will definitely be addressing some of those. If not, we can also address them as we will send you out the link to the recording of today's webinar. As I mentioned, we want you to sit back and relax and give you full attention to the conversation and learn from Guillaume as much as what you can. So throughout our session today, I will be sharing visual references to the key message as well. So key takeaways that you can download and save and use back in your organization. So no need to make notes at all. So with that, I think let's start our conversation. So Guillaume, let me start with a first question to you. And when you look at how most organizations approach learning strategy today, what would you say is one of the biggest misconceptions you see?
I think the main misconception is that alignment equals impact. I'm meeting a lot of CLOs who are perfectly aligned. Their learning programs map beautifully to every strategic pillar of the organization. But nothing truly changes. The business still struggles with the same capability gaps. And there are usually several reasons for that. Because you, as a CLO, you can be aligned to the wrong strategy. You can be aligned, but too late. Or you can be aligned, but to what leaders are saying, not what will really drive performance for their organizations.
And I think that's a great statement to start with, that alignment does not always equals impact. I think that's really impactful to take away from today. But before we go further, I think let's get our audience a little bit more involved. And I would actually like to launch a poll with our audience. And the question I would like to pose to you is, in your organization, how often does L&D directly influence business strategy, not just simply align to it? So on the screen, you will see you have 5 options to select from. Please select one, and then we'll have a quick look at the results in a minute or so. And of course, you can be as honest as possible. Give us your real input, and then we'll see where we land in our polls. I think we'll give a few more seconds, and then we can end the poll and see where we've ended. Right, I think from what you can see on the screen is our results. So we have about 57% in the sometimes feature. So we've brought in the to advise on people and capability topics. And I think that's really positive, a really good outcome that we are having that alignment and we are doing the right move forward. It's just now that topic is still there. It's like when you are called in for that advice, is that advice taken? And is the advice valuable? And does it make a performance impact on the organization? So let's continue with our conversation today, Guillaume, and let's come back to alignment. Have you experienced it yourself, or maybe have an example where we've seen this misalignment happen?
Yeah, well, I imagine that many of you heard from your CEO that you need to be AI ready, let's say by 2027. I think that's a demand that is on every single one of us. I'm making it of myself as a CEO. And the company might need to foster a culture of innovation. So typically, an the organization will start looking for new providers, find content on the topic, build modules, maybe around design thinking, agile methodology, problem solving. Everything might look great and perfectly aligned, at least on paper. And we've seen such real examples. That's the one I'm referring to is quite real. 3 months on the line, we've got a CFO pretty frustrated because it turns out that the real challenge wasn't innovation. It was scale. The company ended up not being able to produce to meet the demand, and they ended up turning away orders. So that's an actual examples where alignment alone is falling short. The learning strategy was perfectly aligned, but just not to the right problem.
That's very good. And, as a CEO, how would you have maybe handled that situation differently?
Well, my advice is you should start by asking grounding questions, such as what is the actual constraints the business is facing right now? What is really costing business money today? How could we reduce cost? How could we improve customer support or improve customer services? Because as a CEO, we might not have all the answers. The executive team might not be aligned among themselves, and they are certainly looking for some of the answers and can appreciate to take a step back in that process. And that's when L&D can come in to facilitate the conversation with all the stakeholders, not to execute against specific priorities or perceived priorities.
And from your experience, do you think L&Ds are ready for do this today?
I will say that they are still developing that muscle, which is totally understandable. It's, I guess it has been a new approach to a large extent. The role has been built primarily around responding to requests with an approach which was tell me your strategy and I'll build a training. And let's say that in learning, we've been rewarded for that. But as a strategic L&D partner, we shouldn't wait for instructions. And then the right L&D partner should basically diagnose a problem and build the capability intelligence to tackle the real root causes.
Okay, interesting word that you use, capability intelligence. What do you mean around that?
It means L&D need to know things the C-suite doesn't know, really. So that means that you need to understand that most executives can tell you what their strategic priorities are, but very few can tell you precisely which capabilities they have today, which ones they are missing, and where the critical gaps are. And when I say capability, I mean that full combination of skills, behaviors, habits, and context. That's something we call the capability equation, the CrossKnowledge capability equation, as far as we are concerned. And that's really what the L&D job is about, not to execute training, but to be the organization capability diagnostician.
Okay. And do you again have an example where how this would look in practice?
Well, if I, for simplicity's sake, stick to my AI readiness or adoption example I used earlier, I think everyone is dealing with this right now, with a CEO typically saying we need to be AI ready by next year. That's a direction, that's not a strategy. A strategic L&D leader will do a number of things. I guess first, define capabilities. What does being AI ready really require? What are the skills, behaviors, habits, and how people should apply them in context? Second one will be to diagnose the gaps using analytics, of course, manager insights, to see where those capabilities are missing or are currently underdeveloped. Third aspect will be to build a capability ecosystem, connecting again the skills, the behaviors, the habits, and the enablers to make learning stick. Fourth, embedding it, integrating the capabilities into workflows and leadership accountability. So all of those can become part of how the work gets done day to day. Finally, you need to measure impact. That's absolutely key. What behaviors have changed? What performance outcomes can you actually measure? Can you see? So that's, to my mind, currently, in today's world, what it means to move from alignment to impact. You are helping the business figure out what being AI ready requires in human terms.
Okay. And I suppose that, that's where we have our skill to impact model that can really help and assist with that as well. And I'm actually glad that you mentioned define capability first, because, and then secondly, you mentioned gap analysis. And when we work with teams, we see it's often done the other way around so often. And actually what you're describing is the difference between problem-led and diagnosis-led learning strategy. And too often organizations begin with gap analysis, identifying what the skills are missing today rather than what the capabilities are required to deliver tomorrow's outcome. When you define the target capability first, you anchor learning in the business value, not necessarily the activity. So then when we define the capability directly from a business outcomes you want to achieve. So again, if we then secondly come back to the gap analysis, then you also measure really how do you optimize the future state of the organization. If you do it the other way around, so do the gap first, you're only really looking at the current state of that role and therefore delivering the activities to get the role better, not necessarily solving the future problems. But this, of course, requires L&D to have a lot of access or insight into business data, operational data, performance data, and even potentially financial performance metrics. Most CLOs or L&D departments don't have access to this type of things.
No, that's true. That's a real challenge, and therefore the gap we need to close. Think about it. Any CFO has a dashboard showing exactly where money is being lost or profit is being made. Basically, any executive leader will know what are the KPIs that are driving business performance. A chief product officer will know why a product launch is being delayed, for example. And so L&D needs to be part of the conversations around those KPIs, the measurement of the business. And so it shouldn't be there just to pitch training programs, but really to understand where I would say human capability might be the missing piece.
And I think this may be a good time to check in with our audience again. And actually, I would like to post a question to the audience of what is your biggest barriers of proving L&D's business impact? And this time we've actually shared a poll with you, again, 5 answers to select from, but here you can select multiples as well. So you might not just have a single blocker or a barrier, but you might have multiple. So please select all the ones that's relevant to you and where you're really struggling to deliver that business impact. And then again, we will look at the answers in a few seconds. I think we'll give a few more seconds and then we'll close the poll and share with you all the results that we've seen. I think most people has responded. So what we'll do is we'll close the poll and then we'll move into our results. And we can see quite a spread, with the lowest one being 13% getting business leaders to care about measurement. So that's good to see that, that is the lowest one. And I'm also really pleased to see we have such a high score on connecting our learning initiatives to specific business goals, which means, as we said in the beginning, we are aligning to those business, but yet we might still miss the value aspect of that. So, and this is what we see across our industry as well, that there is still people out there that does lack the analytical skill to link the learning outcomes. There is definitely still questions around what type of data do we actually measure and what do we look at. So again, what is those key metrics we look at? But clearly, what we can see is we are doing the right things. We just need to do that, maybe the final steps, or getting in that muscle that you mentioned earlier, more practiced and more engaged. So I think let's move on with our questions. And, I want to also explore a little bit something you say you mentioned about L&D being a more strategic partner. And that almost sounds like an internal consultant type of situation for me. But we know that most L&D professionals actually comes through the training or instructional design, maybe a bit of HR background, not necessarily consultancy.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right on that. That's the challenge and the transition we are in currently, right? So the profession is evolving because the work itself has changed. Content creation, I would say course design, those skills are still valuable, but AI is definitely there and can do a lot of that heavy lifting now. So what's ahead of us is much bigger, in my opinion. Becoming architects of organizational capability. It's a new territory for many teams. And that's why we are focusing so much on it at CrossKnowledge, being focused on building tools that support this shift, like the skill to impact model, as well as new platform capabilities or functionalities that help L&D teams spot those capability gaps, because they need help, they need support in that transition phase, that change of their profession. And so helping them to connect all that to business outcomes, ultimately.
And I think we can all agree that the jobs is changing and L&D's position and organization is changing. What do you think is those specific shifts that the L&D leader needs to make in the future?
I think there are three big ones, really. The first one is we need to stop thinking in programs. We need to start thinking in ecosystems. Because as I tried to explain indirectly, that's really what it's all about, the ecosystem you're operating into. So if I want to take an example, when a sales team needs to improve client conversations, the traditional L&D response today might be that we will build an upskilling program for that very sales team. But maybe the issue is more related to the CRM that is making it hard to access customer history, or a simple lack of customer insights being available to the sales team, or maybe there are some capability gaps in consultative selling. So learning might only be 20% of the solution. So if, as an L&D function, the focus is only on those 20%, that effectively they control today, the over 80% will defeat the purpose of the whole project because they won't be addressed.
But that typically means that L&D now need to start influencing things outside of our traditional remit.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what being strategic or acting in a strategic partnership mode really means. Mm-hmm. It means you're in the room with the executives we were referring to earlier, saying, we have a learning solution for you, but it won't work unless we also fix, in my example, the workflow and change the incentive structure. So we get the CRM right, and we change the incentive structure. So asking the question also, who's owning those?
Absolutely. And again, it comes back full sort of back to impact. And again, measure impact as it was one of those buzzwords that we hear all the times. And we still find that most organizations struggle with. So, I mean, in your experience, what is those actual barriers that you come across with?
Well, that's the right question because it's leading us to the second shift. The challenge being that L&D has traditionally measured learning outcomes, but not business outcomes. So typically, we would measure completion rates, behavior change in some occasions, but certainly L&D stopped shy of measuring the economic impact in most cases. Asking, did costs go down? Did customer delivery times improve? And very often it's hard to do because there has been no measurement before the project started. So there is no reference point or starting point to refer to measure the progress. And when sometimes the data exists, it's really, really hard to represent what was the effective learning contribution versus all the other variables that can be observed by the business. But that shift is already happening. One project I'm especially proud of was with a global retail organization that wanted to improve agility and customer responsiveness. So there, rather than launching a generic training program, we focus with them on learning directly directly on the business goals, empowering store managers to make local decisions. It wasn't an easy process to convince every stakeholder, but within months, they saw a much faster customer service, fewer escalations, and improved sales performance. So that's alignment done right. When you teach people exactly what the business needs them to do differently, you can see results almost immediately.
And thanks for that great example. I was about to ask you for an example again, so thanks for sharing. If you're one of the audience guy like listening to us today, what is the key insight from your experience that is really get to that measurable impact? Do you have some key takeaways for us?
I think you must design for measurability from the very start. Before you build anything, agree with the business sponsor. I would say what specific business metrics we are trying to move. What would success look like in, let's say, 90 days, 6 months, 12 months, whatever the duration of the project or the span of time you want to consider. What else might influence that metric? And how will we isolate learning effects as a learning effect or the learning impact? And here is the hard part. Sometimes the answer is we can't prove it. And I will be provocative, Andre. If you can't design a way to measure business impact, maybe you shouldn't build the program in the first place.
Yeah, I totally agree, but I can just imagine my stakeholders' reaction when I share that feedback with them.
Yeah, but it forces prioritization, right? Of course, here I'm not recommending, it was really provocative, to stop everything overnight. It's transformation that we need, not disruption of the L&D function. Obviously, we still need to cover all the basics, all the essentials, such as compliance, basic training, leadership, and so on. But then we can start focusing on initiatives where business impact can be measured to really make a difference. And that will lead us to the third major change I wanted to mention, which is the one that most people will tend to miss. It's a story we've been telling about building skills and activating capability. They are not the same thing. Again, kind of using an example, you can train 500 managers on giving feedback. That's skill building. Yeah. But if those managers don't have time in their workflow to give feedback, or if the culture punishes honest conversations, or if their boss doesn't model it, then the capability is not developed and sits dormant.
Yep, totally a very important distinction as well. And, if skill is not enough on its own anymore, how does activation or skill activation really look like in practice then today?
Yeah, it's about designing for the last mile, right? It's recognizing that behavior change happens in the workflow, not in the learning program. Again, I'll use examples because it's really easy. I'm always telling story as a CEO and as a next salesperson, but instead of change management, you can embed an AI avatar in the actual transformation project. People can then ask questions in real time and they can get instant feedback when they need it. So one of our clients introduced this solution to improve their feedback culture, and we are seeing great impact in the field at scale. Sorry. So this is when learning becomes, at least in my opinion, infrastructure, not just an event.
Very true. And again, it does require L&D to actually start reaching out to different departments like IT, for instance, or operations or communication teams or HR tech teams, so again, widening that remit of them.
Yeah, no, you're right. And some of those departments will be more important than others. IT, especially, I see in the chat that Michel Diaz was mentioning that is absolutely right. And so, yes, that's why strategic L&D should be more than just a team sport. You can't do it alone. And if you're trying to, you're playing the wrong game. And Andre, yourself, I believe you've worked with many or across many organizations. What in your mind does it take to move from partnership theory to practicing co-ownership?
Very, very good question. And thanks for asking me as well. So for me, co-ownership is really about redefining the accountability of learning. It's ensures that learning ownership sits with those people who directly influence performance, right? The leaders, the managers, and the employees, not always just L&D on its own. It's the point where sort of learning stops being an activity and sort of like you mentioned before, how it gets when the work gets done, how does it become part of that world? When I work with clients, I use our co-ownership model to help them see where accountability really lives, right? Where does it sit? We start, first of all, again, by mapping who owns what. Where does the leadership sponsorship happens? Where does managers reinforce and coach? And more importantly, as well, as where do employees apply and share learning? We need to go back to that level as well. With these gaps then identified, for example, we work with companies that have very strong learning design capability. But what we see is then they have weak reinforcement loops. So again, they deliver the course, but then simply walk away from it. And that is where that co-ownership conversation really starts. And we need to move away from delivery to enablement, as you mentioned. So once we then aligned around a specific model or a framework or an outcome, we then use something that we created, what we call the co-ownership charter. And this is a document that we then share across the whole organization. And it's a very visible commitment that the organization can have of what is the shared roles, what is our principles, and how do we govern that principles. And as leaders and managers and employees, we all play a part, right? And we all have some responsibility to take care of that. And I think for today in the chat, you can see we've shared a link. And as a special thank you to you joining today, I actually want to share that base template with you that we use as part of our consultancy services that we run specifically with our customer base. And like I said, it sort of serves as a practical reference to help you start that conversation in your own organization. And you'll see from the document how it translates the idea from co-ownership into those roles, into principles, and specifically how to govern that process as well. And this is, I think, the way of truly moving from learning into how things get done in your organization. And of course, we're going to have more webinars or posts or information around the co-ownership model and specifically the charter in the future. So please look at the document. If you have any questions, reach out to your contact in CK, but also, post in the chat before we end today's call if you have any specific questions around that. But I think let's jump back into the present, Guillaume. It's late 2025. And what's happening right now that makes strategic alignment such an urgent topic for L&D leaders?
That's a tricky question. In my opinion, it comes down to three converging forces, really. would say the first one is that AI is rewriting the traditional L&D playbook. If you look at content creation, personalization, assessment, AI, let's be honest, can do it faster and cheaper. That's really why we are working on automating our L&D teams, can spot skill gaps and trigger learning in the flow of work. You'll know a lot more about that very soon. CrossKnowledge will be making some announcement in that domain. And with our partnership, new partnership, I should say, with Boundless Learning, we are now offering organizations the possibility to outsource content creation. So that's freeing up time for L&D to focus on the strategic work and building those relationships for co-ownership, as you mentioned. Would say the new value for L&D teams is to help organizations figure out which capabilities matter and how to embed them into their work. While the second force is that the shelf life of skills is collapsing. Whatever we teach today might be obsolete in 18 months, really. That means L&D can't be only about transferring knowledge. It must be about building learning agility, teaching people how to learn continuously in the flow of work. I would say also on that topic that very few businesses today can say what the next 18 months will look like. So you need to have that agility. Then there is a third force, which is more a constraint imposed on everybody in the business right now across any market segment, which is that the regulatory complexity is exploding. If you think the EU AI Act, accessibility requirements, every one of those, and I could name a few of those, require new capabilities and require those capabilities very fast, right? So any organization, CrossKnowledge included, that can build and activate those capabilities quickly would have a massive advantage. The ones that can't will struggle, lose trust, and potentially would end up paying fines as well, unfortunately.
Very true. And I think speaking of the AI Act is actually really important. And I believe it's coming in, is it August 2026? So, we don't have that much time, I think, to prepare for it. And it can fundamentally change how organizations use AI and interact with AI. And I think that's why we actually took the step and scheduled another webinar on the 25th of November, which is part of our deep dive series, where we're really going to talk about how this AI Act is going to affect companies and how we can align better with it, but also give our audience concrete tools and strategic guidance on how to use that regulation. So yeah, so please, we will see in the chat, we will drop a link to this deep dive session on the 25th of November. So please make sure you register for that and come if you can benefit from that, definitely. So Guillaume, we covered quite a bit today. And if you are a CLO or an L&D professional listening to us today or to the recording in the future, what should your Monday morning action list look like?
I'm not a CLO myself, so I'll say that with the required humility, but this is my thinking based on all the interaction I have with that community, all the ones we are working with. I would say you should stop doing those three things. First, stop building programs nobody's really asking for. Second, you should stop measuring things that don't matter to the business. And third, I would say you should stop waiting for permission to have a strategic conversation with any of the executive stakeholders you need to engage with. And you should start doing three things. First, you should map the capabilities that would ensure the highest business benefits right now. Right? Because what matters for a CEO is always the right now. Almost yesterday. Second, you should build one small initiative where you can prove the economic impact with certainty. Your first proof point, right? And then third, I think we covered it. It's focusing on co-ownership.
Very good. Very good stop and start points there. And one final question sort of from me, Guillaume, is as a COO of an organizational transformation partner, what should organizations be looking for in a learning partner if they genuinely want to make this shift in the future?
Well, you should be looking for partners that can help you think. You should ask your potential partners, can you help us diagnose capability gaps? Do you have a methodology for connecting learning to business metrics? Can you help us build capability ecosystems? So I would say that some might find it uncomfortable to ask those questions, but that questioning really forces to clarify whether what they are planning will impact the business or not. And that's the kind of partner you want today, I believe. Someone that makes you think harder, not just execute faster.
And I mean, the obvious question to this is what if they can't find a partner like that?
Well, I guess they can turn to CrossKnowledge. We can certainly help with all of that. So.
Very good, very good. And I think this is a perfect point to sort of look at a little bit what we covered and sort of summarize. And I think we can all agree to say, alignment is essential, but it's not enough to create transformation in organizations. Our real question is not, are we aligned to strategy? But it should be more around, is our alignment solving the capability problems that determine whether strategy succeeds or fails? That's a much harder question, as we've heard today. It requires diagnostic skills, business acumen, and the courage to tell executives what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. And when learning leaders make the shift, they don't need to ask for a seat at the table. They become the reason the table exists. So before we close, and I want to leave you again with that important reminder, as I mentioned earlier, the European AI Act is a perfect example why strategic alignment matters. If you are wondering how your organization will navigate this shift, remember, it's not just about compliance. It's about building the capabilities that turn regulation into opportunities and drive real business outcomes. And that's why on the 25th of November, we will be hosting a special conversation with our privacy lead, our solution consultant, and our partner called Law Pilots. You'll also get a look at our AI Academy that we developed with conjunction with Law Pilots and walk away with a practical strategy of how you can implement the act in the right way. So Guillaume, thank you for sharing all your insights with today. I have certainly taken a few things away that I can start using differently with our customer base. But before we close, is there sort of one final thought you would like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I guess I would like to leave you with this. I would say learning can no longer sit on the edge of transformation. It must sit at the center of it. I think it used to be IT driving all of it. I think learning has a massive role to play in it. So the organizations that will thrive are the ones that treat learning as a system, not as a series of programs, and that will build real capability around their strategic priorities. At least that's where we believe we should focus at CrossKnowledge, and that's where we are effectively focusing, helping clients connect learning, capability, and performance so that transformation takes hold. So that's it.
Thank you very much. And I was like quickly scanning through our chat to see if we have any questions that people have posted. If you have any questions, please let me know in the chat. I couldn't come across. Michael has made some really good points, and again confirmed a lot of things that we have. Again, yeah, Michael, thank you for your interaction. One last time, if anybody has a question, please submit, and we can see if we can address that. If not, if there's no longer questions, I think this is a good time to say goodbye and thank you for joining us today. And I hope you've learned a lot from Guillaume. He shared a lot of his practical insights, but also give you some practical examples of how to implement and align L&D best to the business strategy. No more questions in the chat, Guillaume. I think we're ready to say goodbye.
Well, then, thank you very much for having me again. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Excellent. And thanks, everybody. And make sure you join us on the 25th of November. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
See you soon. Bye-bye.